So bye, Miss American Pie. Drove my Chevy to...
Shh. Hello, and welcome to the Everyone Has a Story podcast. Now, there's a saying out there in business. It's more like a philosophy, and it says, if you're in business, you're selling. Now, as a business owner, I agree with this 110%, but I also think that this kind of carries over to our day-to-day general life as well. And today, my guest speaker, she is the perfect example. She exemplifies this exactly because not only is she a great sales coach, very expert in that arena of sales, but when you start to hear her stories, she even does it in everyday life. So she is that example of true life in general and in business that we're always selling. And I can't wait for her to share her one story. And actually, it's such a great story that I'm even giving up my spot in the show to tell a story because I want Michelle to tell hers that. So with no more ado here, let me introduce Michelle Hecht. So welcome, Michelle.
Thank you so much, Roger. It's so nice to be here.
Oh, I am so excited for this podcast. You know how excited I've been over the last 2 or 3 months once we got introduced to each other. But anyway, Michelle is the founder of the Bounce Back Ability Coach. And when you hear her story, you'll understand exactly where that title comes from. But first, let me have Michelle kind of introduce herself to the audience.
Thank you again, Roger. So my name is Michelle Hecht, and I call myself the Bounce Back Ability Coach. And this was a culmination of just everything that I've been through over a 20-year sales career, the highs and lows, finding lessons in the mess along the journey. And the bulk of my career was spent in pharmaceutical sales, mainly as an individual contributor, but also as a sales coach, a sales trainer, a mentor, a liaison, and somebody that had just a lot of leadership roles and never wanted to pursue specifically sales leadership, really wanted to go into coaching and training to help other people grow and branch out and just humanize their sales process because we use it every day, all day. So spent 20 years doing that. And for the last couple of years, I've just been coaching and training and changing the narrative.
Yeah. But the nice thing is that you're bringing back the correct narrative when it comes to selling. And that's what I really think most about you and what you do. But I do know that from our very, very, very first conversation that we ever had together, you came right out of the gates and you started telling me stories as if we've known each other for years and years. And so typically this is a time where I tell my intro story to kind of get the ball rolling. But I'm giving way to you, Michelle. I want you to tell us about that trip down the frozen food aisle at the grocery store.
So I love telling this story, and I especially love telling it to you, Roger, because we got such a chuckle out of it and we were on the same wavelength right out of the gate.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So over the years, I've learned that while sales representative, professional, sales leader might be your role and your title on the job, quote unquote, we really are selling every single day. And whether you're trying to close your partner, spouse on taking out the garbage or tidying up, or your children, going to bed on time or eating their vegetables, or getting on the phone and trying to get a doctor's appointment this week versus next month, there's always an exchange between people where there's an outcome that people want, and sometimes they get it, sometimes they don't, but there's a compromise and there's like a dance back and forth until there's a solution and there's an outcome, so to speak. And so I was in my local specialty market that I frequent, and a few times I bumped into the comedian Tracy Morgan there. He lives not too far and he goes there. And I would always say hi and friendly and whatnot, never made a big deal about it. But after like the third, fourth time, we were standing in the frozen food aisle And I figured, you know what? I am a diehard SNL fan. I mean, since like day one, I could recite every episode character. It's in my blood. And I really wanted to leverage that moment and that exchange because I wanted to see if I could get tickets to SNL. And so I went up to him and, we locked eyes for a second and I decided to go up to him and I said, you know what, Tracy, we really have to stop meeting like this in the frozen food section. Like maybe next time we'll meet in the bread aisle. But the conversation took a turn where I said to him, what do I have to do? I mean, before I asked him what I have to do, I basically buttered him up a little bit. I was talking about different episodes that he was on and about how the fact that I'm a fan and some of the things he's been in. And then when I felt comfortable enough and broke the ice, I said, Tracy, what's a girl got to do to get tickets to see SNL live? And at first he was hesitant. And then he said to me, well, and lo and behold, he's like, I'll tell you what, give me your cell phone number. I'm going to reach out to my assistant and he will give you a call and we'll see what we can do. I gave him my number. I didn't think really anything of it. In fact, I was expecting nothing to happen. And a few months went by, nothing happened. And then all of a sudden, like 2.5 months went by, I got a text message from his assistant that basically said, are you still interested in those tickets? And my response to him was, does a bear poop in the woods? So the moral of the story is, and yes, we worked out the logistics. I ended up getting not just 2 tickets, but like dead center, VIP, the whole experience. It was a defining moment in my life because of the fact that I'm an SNL fan, but also because of the fact that in that moment with Tracy, whether he was a big celebrity that pulled up in a Bugatti or whether he was just a neighbor or somebody that worked in the store, you have to take chances sometimes. And if you don't ask, you don't get. And it was just a very human exchange. And it was a sale. I was basically pitching him and closed a sale where I got 2 tickets to SNL, which I would have never, ever had. So.
And I absolutely love that story. You could tell that story. Now that we got it recorded, I'll get to hear it anytime I want. But, if anybody out there is trying to figure out where's Michelle from, I think you can tell by her accent and her love for SNL that she's a New Yorker true and all the way through. So that's great. So let's get to our podcast, and thank you for that story.
Sure.
We talked about, bounce back ability. What does that really mean? What does that look like? So tell us, what is the bounce back ability?
I'm glad that you asked that. And I can say this with 100% confidence. If you would have asked me the same question years ago, I probably wouldn't have a definitive answer for you the way that I have it now. So for me, first of all, the word bounce back ability is in the dictionary, which I think is kind of cool. Yep. But it means something very personal to me. And if I was able to lay out a blueprint or a timeline of my life and my entire sales career and my journey and the highs and the lows, and factoring in, very, very specific things along the way that were painful and traumatic, but then I had wonderful things, my children, got married. But it's been a very wild ride with some very extreme highs and lows. And it's not so much what I've been through as it is what I've learned along the journey. And I don't have all the answers, but I do know for a fact that sales, as it is a very volatile, emotional roller coaster with a lot of rejection. And we're constantly trying to reinvent the wheel and change things and speak a certain way and look for ways to prospect better. There's always ways that we're trying to do things. And what I've learned and applied to the whole bounce back ability concept is that because we are selling not just all day at our jobs and in our workplace, we're doing it all throughout the supermarket, the frozen food aisle, at home, on the phone, whatever. It's all the lessons within my journey that I have grown from and I have applied to my career to bounce back stronger and with a healthier, stronger mindset and resilience. and a deeper understanding of people, a deeper understanding of what people want, what they need. And so I've taken all of those things and put them into a career, a coaching career, because I identify with people, especially sales professionals and sales leaders and business owners, about how to engage with one another and how to look at the big picture, like a 20,000 foot aerial view, that it's not just about your job role and the different things, your hard skills. It's this whole package that is woven very intricately.
And to add a little bit to that, with that little bit of New York City flair, which is great. That's what I love. So how does bounce back ability, how does it really apply to sales?
Great question. So bounce back ability is extremely important in sales, because many people, if they hear that word, right, bounce back ability or just bounce back, they think of like the comeback is stronger than the setback. They think of grit, they think of resilience. And those are words that are very loosely thrown around. And it's one thing to understand what those words mean, and it's another thing to execute. And it's very difficult to execute those things and learn them and apply them as a leader, as an individual contributor, because there's so many other things going on around us, and it's very easy to get stuck. And when we get stuck, no matter how easy our jobs might seem or how we know our territories and our customer base, it just magnifies things and makes it very difficult. So in terms of bounce back ability with sales, we do deal with a lot of rejection. We hear no a lot more than we hear yes. If we allow ourselves to go down that rabbit hole and we don't look at the big picture, and we don't find ways to celebrate our small wins and to really play the long game and to constantly be filling our pipeline and bouncing back from adversity, bouncing back from a bad day, a bad meeting, that's what it's all about. It's momentum with this day in, day out, so that when these things do present themselves, we're able to not only face them with more of a positive mindset, but bounce back when they go south.
Well said. And I know that you've had some. I know that you've learned a lot from your past experiences, and it shows with everything that you do. And tell us really, what was that tipping point that really made you say, okay, I have to start this bounce back ability coaching process business?
I'm so glad you asked that. And I'll try to answer that in under 5 minutes. So I think it all starts with self-awareness. And in sales, I think that it's a common thread that many salespeople are not proactive, they're reactive, right? Like they have the right intention and they feel they have the right mindset and they have the skills and the resources and the tools. And they have the best of intentions, and then things go south and they don't pan out. And so it's very easy to just react to that. If we change it up a little bit and focus more on being proactive and almost like preventative, right? When these things happen, they're easier to deal with. And so my turning point, well, I had many, but the one that was the most significant, because I've been doing coaching and training and infusing it into my own sales process, working with team members and people throughout the country and my, former companies. But the one defining moment was probably, I was laid off. There was a large company layoff in early 2019. And following that was just a series of very, very difficult, painful occurrences, loss of family members, a car accident, my husband ended up getting laid off. Like there was just, that year was probably the worst one I've had on record. And so one thing came after another, and it was all at the same time, very close together. And by the end of 2019, I was in a very low place. I didn't have enough gusto to even do what I love to do, which is selling and coaching. Like I couldn't, I was broken, basically. I really felt like I was in the lowest place ever. And so I started doing the work from the inside out. I started doing a lot of research. I put myself out on LinkedIn. I started connecting with people, having conversations, doing research. I was accepted into a program with Harvard Business School for negotiation mastery. Like I just approached things differently. And then in March, and this is where it gets fun. In March, my friends and I decided to go to Denver because Oprah was on tour for her live 2020 Vision Tour. And it was the Pepsi Arena. It was like 15,000 people. We made it a long weekend. And when we got to Denver, my girlfriend said to me, well, as if this is not great enough, I have VIP tickets for all of us. After the show is over, we have these tickets to meet and greet Oprah and have a photo opportunity. And it was unbelievable. And so as excited as I was, my wheels were still spinning all day long. And I'm like, I have to make this impactful. I have to make this worthwhile. I don't want to be just another fan that's taking a selfie and bragging. And I really want this to mean something because it does, especially at the point that I was at after the year that I had. So, and it's funny, I remember telling you this, Roger, when I was online waiting to meet her, in that moment, I felt like I was training my whole life for that moment. You know, it's like you get one shot, right? Like Wayne Gretzky, like you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So knowing that this was my big chance and I had to do something, when it was my turn to go up to her, instead of the whole like, oh my God, I'm so excited to meet you, I'm a big fan, I was like, no. I want to be memorable and I want to make this count. And so we were initially told that we had like a minute or two, each person, because there was 200 of us out of 15,000. So I'm at the back of the line, I go up to her and I decide in that moment that I'm going to tell her in literally one long breath. I don't think I came up for air. I basically was able to, I told her everything that I had been through in 2019. I gave her a bit of a background story and I didn't hold back. And I wanted her to know this. And I told her that I was grateful to be there and how much that meant to me, that I've been a fan of hers my entire life. And that if there was ever a time that I needed to hear the messages and be in that space, it was then. And I gave her a lot of other details. So she took her glasses off. She held my hands. Every time I tell this story, I get goosebumps, but she held my hands and she took her glasses off and she started to cry. And I'm standing there like, I just made Oprah Winfrey cry. Like, me, who am I? I'm a nobody. She starts to cry and she basically says to me, you know something, there's a reason why you're here right now. And you have to remember that everybody, no matter how wealthy you are, what race you are, religion, creed, sexual orientation, you know, from the baby that's crying for a bottle to a homeless man on the street with a cup out to somebody in their ivory tower, you know, a big CEO, Jeff Bezos, whoever. Everybody has one thing in common, and it's the common denominator. We all want to be seen, heard, and validated, no matter who it is. And she basically told me, you know, as long as you keep laying your bricks one in front of the other and going in a certain direction, in the direction you want to go in, you know, you just have to stay the course. And we had a very in-depth conversation. There were other things that she touched upon. We took the photo and then she said, wait, Michelle, come back. I want to take one more photo with you. And I looked at her like, wow. So she puts her arm around me and with the other hand, she puts it over her heart. And she says to me, you are going to look back at this picture one day and you are going to remember that I said that you are all heart. And that, I have goosebumps all over my arms. In that moment, it was the right message at the right time by the right person. It was like the ultimate validation that I wasn't crazy for wanting what I wanted and that everything happens for a reason. And it brought me to where I am today. And when I got back home to New Jersey, I promised myself that I would never, ever play small again. And then I would never shrink to fit in anybody else's box. And that there's no limits to what I want to accomplish. And I knew in my heart what I've always wanted to do. And I was afraid to take the leap. And I was stuck in 2019 and everything that happened. But from March 8th until today, over a year, I have made more progress in my life than I've made in the last 25 years. So that is my defining moment. And
like I said to everybody earlier, you are a great storyteller. I love it. And it doesn't hurt to have that New York City flair to it. So now we now understand who you are and where you're coming from. So now let's talk about your process that you have with your clients. You know, what does that look like and feel like?
That has probably changed 36 times over the course of my career. And it's safe to say that when I first got into sales 20 plus years ago, there was a way of doing things, and it was very process oriented. It was based on metrics. It was a very linear way of doing things. You know, you have to start here and then go to here and then go to here, and there's a cycle, and this is how you prospect, and this is how you engage and trial close. Everything was very cookie cutter, and that was the way that you sold and the way you were expected to sell. And over time, it just kept morphing into something different, because people started to become more educated consumers. And then the internet came out, and then everybody would do a lot of research. And by the time they got to sales professionals, they had 95% of the information they needed. And the last step was talking to a sales representative to close the deal and get what they want. So the process that I have found that I always peppered into my way of doing things over 20 years, even if I was pushed outside of it, I knew it worked. And if I ever knew that it worked more than anything I know now, especially through this pandemic, people don't want to be sold to. People don't like spending money. People don't like the buying process. Like, well, let me backtrack. They don't like being sold to, but they love buying. They love the act of buying things. But also people make buying decisions. And this is not just some people, all people. People make buying decisions purely off of emotion. And knowing that if you go at people with processes and with rigid cycles, it's not going to work, especially now. And so what I've always done, and I do now, is I find creative ways to connect with people that interrupt the flow of their day-to-day. I infuse just a lot of personalization, creativity, and I care a lot about getting to know people. And I don't even talk right out of the gate about business and sales and everything. It's very important to make those connections and to make authentic connections and to be authentic yourself and trust that the people are buying from you. They're buying an experience with you. It's not because of how you describe your product or service and that you've memorized a brochure from front to back. It all goes back to you and whether or not you care about people and how you connect with people.
And so how do you help someone identify what their authentic self is?
That's a great question. A lot of these are all great questions.
That's why I'm the host.
Yes, you are. So I really feel that has become like this trendy buzzword that people are using, and they have been for over a year. It's not just now, about being more authentic and more empathetic and emotional intelligence. And all of those sound wonderful, but if they're just in our head and we have no idea how to implement them, they mean nothing. So it really does take two things. It takes a step back from everything that you've been taught, that you've learned, and that you've been expected to believe, right? And it also takes a deep dive. You have to be real with yourself. You have to admit where you're falling short, what your weaknesses are, where you need to improve, and what your strengths are and what you're great at. And you ultimately have to be willing to not be so caught up in this idea of perfection, that you have to be the best, you have to sound the best, you have to be the most educated in terms of your product and service. I mean, all of that is important, but there's a big piece of this that also has to be factored in. You have to understand that everyone is imperfect. Everyone has stuff going on. And that if you can just slow down to speed up, basically, and just take your time and play the long game and not just look at it as a transaction and that you'll always have transactions. If you're always playing the long game and building relationships, you're going to end up filling your pipeline. You're going to always have people to talk to, call, email. And most importantly, you're going to have people referring you because they notice that you are different than everybody else. And that is the secret sauce. And it has always worked for me, and it works for everybody that believes in this.
Yeah. And that's why I had you answer that question, because no one could sell how to be authentic better than you. So nice job on that.
Thank you.
So now in Sales 101 training, we always have to hear and how to overcome objections. So as a sales coach, I'm sure you come across plenty of objections. What does that look like from a sales coach to a client?
I used to hate objections. I would, I think most salespeople would say that, right? Like they could have the most incredible presentation, demo, conversation, whatever. And then as soon as they present and talk about whatever it is and ask for business and get that objection, their entire demeanor just, goes south, right?
Yep.
And so I really believe, and I see it working more often than not, instead of being afraid of the objections, if you embrace the objections as just questions that need to be addressed a little bit further, a little bit deeper. No doesn't always mean no. I never take it as no. I take it as not now. Maybe now is not a good time. Maybe they just hung up with their, partner, spouse and had an argument. Maybe they just found out some bad news. Maybe they have a deadline and they have a to-do list on their desk that's a mile long. No, it doesn't always mean like, absolutely not. I never want to do business with you. And it doesn't always mean that. And so I look at it as an opportunity to dig a little bit deeper. And maybe I didn't do enough of my job. Maybe I didn't do enough work really uncovering certain pain points. Maybe I need to be more specific and ask more specific questions. Maybe I need to make sure that I am not assuming that the people I'm talking to understand everything that I'm saying, and I have to be more thorough. So when someone says no, and it's an objection, or not just no, but any objection, I take it as I did not give them enough, and I did not uncover enough, and I did not, most of all, show them the value of whatever it is that I'm trying to sell. And so what I do now is I discuss the objections up front because I think it really works well. I think that by doing that and addressing it up front, you not only show that you're confident and that it's something that you've worked through before and you're not afraid of it, that you're not new. It also shows that you are aware of the different things that could possibly come up and that you're not afraid to address them and work through them so that they can't come back around and bite you at the end. And it works. It works well.
And I know that one of your big tools that you use is the fear of role playing. Everybody fears role playing. And I'm going to put you on the spot right now. Okay. That you and I are going to do another podcast real soon, and it's going to be on role playing and the benefits of role playing. And we're going to role play with each other because I know talking to you that the more we practice, the better it becomes more real and more natural coming out of the mouth. And to me, everything that you've just said is music to my heart because deep down, I'm a salesperson too. I love the science of sales. I love the philosophy of sales. I love the interaction of sales. And when we meet again on the next podcast, I'm going to tell all the stories because I'm dying to try to trump you one time with my stories. But we are going to really get to a deep dive and really the art of role playing because I don't think there's anybody better to do that than with you. So with all those accolades, tell my audience one more time, what inspiration do you want to leave them with? What advice do you want to leave them with to say you can move on in that role of being a salesperson the right way?
I would say the number one thing is if you approach your sales career or your leadership role or whatever, if you are in a position where you have to sell and lead and combine them even, if you approach it as if you're just having conversations with neighbors, friends, if you approach it like you're at a barbecue and you're meeting people for the first time, and if you kind of remove that stigma of I have to be this certain way and I have to say it a certain way and I'm being held accountable and it's metrics and it has to be perfect. If you just approach it as like conversations that you're having every day and just be yourself. I'm not saying don't address business, but instead of jumping right into the business, or instead of being generic and just playing the game where like spray and pray, right? Sending out 300 emails and hoping something sticks against the wall. That's not going to cut it. When people feel like you genuinely care and you want to get to know them, and you take the extra time to do some research and to show them that you really want to talk to them. You're not just smiling, dialing, hoping something comes out of it. If you treat people like that and you put a little extra effort in and you play the long game, the rewards are unbelievable and they're exponential.
So why is it? I lied. I have one more question for you. Why is it that when the guys that play the numbers game always get beat that play the relationship game? Always, hands down.
You're going to have to repeat this only because it cut out for like a half a second.
Oh, so really what happens is so many salespeople are trained on playing the numbers game.
Yes.
You got it. I love your spray and pray. I've never heard that before. I love that. But who are building relationships first? Why is that?
Just to understand your question, because of the little bit. So the people that are playing the numbers game and they're really, really good at it, what you're asking is that, maybe they're not so good at playing the long game and like relationship building.
Right. Yeah.
Now, in terms of like prospecting and business or personal or both?
Both.
I really think that it's because the numbers game is quantifiable. It's quantifiable. You can't quantify relationships. You can discuss them. You can have an idea of whether you're building a relationship or you're not. At some point during that relationship building, you're going to have to pivot and ask of something, once you're comfortable enough and you have an idea of what they need. But with numbers, some people just get very caught up in that. And because it's quantifiable and they're competitive and it's just a matter of, one-upping other people or being at the top of the leaderboard, it removes that personal element, that human element. And I'm not saying that I'm all against metrics, because metrics make sense. KPIs make sense. We're in a role to produce and it has to be quantifiable. All I'm saying is that it doesn't have to be an all or nothing approach. It can be quantifiable, but the relationships are part of it. And I think that because those people that are so caught up in the metrics, that they're consumed by it and they just want to see those numbers increase. And it causes that sense of urgency, like, okay, I'm here, I got to get here, and then I got to get here. And when you do that, you're not stopping and taking a deep breath and understanding that the relationship part, the building part, takes a little bit more time, but it's worth it. So the numbers are kind of like almost instant gratification, and you can track them and watch them like people do with the stock market and the Dow and this and that. With relationships, you can't do that. You just have to you have to take a chance. You have to be willing to play the long game and take a chance and believe that you can do it and that it's worthwhile.
Well said. Well said. Michelle, I can't thank you enough for being my guest today. And
Sure.
Thank you for telling those two great stories. And I know that we're going to have plenty more opportunities to share stories, but thank you again. And we are going to have another date on the podcast where we're going to role play the entire time.
And then I'll tell you about my Zoom call that I had that Oprah was on last night.
No, you're always trying to one up me, but I'm going to get my chance to come back. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you, Roger.
The Everyone Has a Story podcast is very honored and humbled to acknowledge the following sponsors. Thank you all for your loyalty and faith in the content. I want to really thank Dave and Dara Feldman at Virtues Matter, the most positive and grateful husband and wife team that helps individuals bring out the best in themselves and others with workshops, retreats, consulting, and the Virtues Card app. Maury Zelkovich at the Maury Method, the world's only brainwave entrainment engineer helping people with stress, anxiety, and so much more. Priya Kumar at Results Coaching, the executive transformation coach providing business financial intelligence that really helps flip that switch on their profit. Jennifer and Gene Sievers at the Severs Real Estate Team, the husband and wife team serving Pierce and Kitsap County residents with their home buying and selling needs. Eric and his superhero team at Ivy Cat Web Designs, no doubt the real superheroes of web development and design. Stephen Buller at Buller Accounting, giving business owners depth and insight to their numbers in his own unique way. Rebecca Howell at Custom Bookkeeping and Accounting, delivering trustworthy bookkeeping services since 2003. And Tim and Sadie Marlowe at BD Local Podcast Studio for the use of their studio and their expertise with the necessary production and editing to make this podcast happen.